On the central plateau of Ethiopia stand 11 churches, each carved from a single gigantic block of stone.
What if everything you thought you knew about the final words of Jesus was incomplete? Deep in the highlands of Ethiopia, hidden within ancient stone churches, carved from single blocks of mountain rock, lies a secret that has been guarded for 2 millennia. A secret so profound that when artificial intelligence finally scanned these sacred texts, historians couldn't speak. Scholars wept. Theologians questioned everything. Because what Jesus said after his resurrection, words carefully preserved in the Ethiopian Bible, but lost to the rest of the world, changes everything we understand about faith, salvation, and the very purpose of his return from death. Are you ready to discover what was hidden? Because once you hear these words, your understanding of Christianity may never be the same. The hidden library of faith. Picture this: 11 churches, each one a masterpiece of human devotion, carved downward into solid rock. Not built up toward heaven, but carved down into the earth, as if reaching toward something buried, something ancient, something deliberately concealed from the world above. This is Lalibela, Ethiopia, and within these stone sanctuaries lies the most complete, most ancient, and most mysterious Bible known to humanity. But here's what most people don't realize.
This is a rare Ethiopian Orthodox Bible manuscript, handwritten in Ethiopia's sacred liturgical language, Ge'ez.
While the Bible you might have on your shelf contains 66 books, the Ethiopian Bible holds 88. That's 22 additional books, 22 collections of wisdom, prophecy, and teaching that vanished from Western Christianity centuries ago. Why were they removed? Who decided these words weren't worthy? And most importantly, what did they contain that made them so dangerous? For 2,000 years, Ethiopian monks have protected these texts with their lives. They've hidden them during invasions, smuggled them during wars, and copied them by candlelight through countless generations. These weren't just old books to them. These were the actual, unfiltered words of Jesus, words too precious, too powerful, too revolutionary to let disappear. And now, for the first time in history, artificial intelligence has scanned every page, analyzed every word, and revealed teachings that will shake the foundations of modern Christianity. The book that couldn't be destroyed. Let me ask you something. What happened during those 40 days between Jesus' resurrection and his ascension to heaven? The Gospels, you know, give us glimpses, appearances to disciples, a moment with Thomas, breakfast by the sea. But they're fragments, snapshots, brief encounters that leave you wondering, surely he said more. Surely the Son of God, having conquered death itself, had more to teach in those precious final days. The Ethiopian texts answer that question with stunning clarity. There's a book called the Book of the Covenant, considered so sacred in Ethiopia that it's read only during the holiest ceremonies. According to these ancient manuscripts, this book contains the complete teachings Jesus delivered after his resurrection, not just to the 12 apostles, but to a larger group of followers who gathered in secret, afraid of Roman persecution. And what Jesus taught them wasn't about buildings or rituals or creating a new religion. It was about something far more dangerous to those in power: inner transformation. Listen to what the AI analysis revealed. Jesus spoke about a coming time when his name would be shouted from every corner, when magnificent temples would rise in his honor, when millions would claim to follow him. but they would miss his actual message entirely. "They will speak my name," he warned, "but will not know my voice. They will build temples of stone while forgetting that you, your very soul, are the only temple that matters." Does that send chills down your spine? Because look around today. How many people use Jesus' name for power, for profit, for control? How many massive churches exist while poverty persists outside their doors? How many claim his authority while living nothing like he taught? It's as if he saw our exact moment in history and tried to warn us. The teachings Rome didn't want you to know. Now, here's where it gets controversial, and I need you to really think about this. The Ethiopian texts explain exactly why these teachings were removed from the Western Bible, and the reasons are more political than you might imagine. First, control. When the Roman Empire officially adopted Christianity in the 4th century, they needed a unified message, a single book, a controllable narrative. These Ethiopian texts, with their emphasis on personal spiritual connection and inner authority, didn't fit the plan. If people believed they could connect directly with God, without priests, without church hierarchy, without institutional permission, what would happen to power structures? Second, mystery. The Ethiopian scrolls describe angels walking among us, demons whispering in our thoughts, spiritual warfare happening in dimensions we cannot see. They describe Jesus teaching about cosmic realities, about the architecture of heaven, about forces beyond our comprehension. Western church leaders found all of this too mystical, too symbolic, too difficult to control or interpret. Third, fear. This is the big one. If ordinary people read that Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you, not in Rome, not in Jerusalem, but inside your own consciousness," they might start seeking God themselves. They might realize they don't need intermediaries. They might discover their own divine authority. And that was terrifying to an institution built on hierarchical power. So, these books were labeled heretical, dangerous, unauthorized. They were removed from councils, excluded from official canons, and gradually forgotten by most of the Christian world, but not by Ethiopia. What Jesus really said about death. The AI analysis uncovered something absolutely profound in these texts. Jesus' complete teaching about death, and it's nothing like what most churches tell you. According to the Ethiopian manuscripts, Jesus used his resurrection to demonstrate a crucial truth. Death is an illusion. Not that bodies don't die, they obviously do, but that death is not the end of consciousness, not the end of your essential self. He compared the body to clothing. "You do not mourn when you change your clothes," he told his followers. "Why then do you weep as if all is lost when the body changes? The soul cannot die. It is eternal, part of the divine fire that existed before the world began and will exist after it ends." But here's the warning that follows, and pay attention, because this is crucial. Jesus said the real death, the only death that truly matters, is spiritual death. He called it the walking death, being physically alive but spiritually asleep, going through the motions of life while your soul withers, existing without purpose, without connection to the divine, without awakening to who you really are. Many will live their entire lives, he said, with beating hearts but sleeping souls. They will chase shadows, wealth, fame, status, pleasure, trying to fill a void that only spirit can fill. They will die, having never truly lived. Think about that. How many people do you know who are technically alive but seem empty inside? How many are so distracted by the material world that they've completely lost touch with their spiritual nature? Jesus wasn't just talking about some distant future judgment. He was describing a tragedy happening right now, in this moment, all around us, and possibly within us. The prophecy about false teachers. The AI scan revealed something that's almost eerie in its accuracy. Jesus' detailed warnings about future religious leaders who would corrupt his message. In the Didascalia, another ancient Ethiopian text, Jesus describes what to watch for. Leaders who appear holy but are driven by greed. Teachers who quote scripture but ignore its meaning. Pastors who build empires in his name while exploiting the vulnerable. Churches that prioritize their survival over their mission. They will wear fine robes, he warned, and speak eloquent words, but their hearts will be far from truth. They will perform grand rituals while ignoring the suffering at their doorstep. They will declare, "Lord, Lord," with their mouths, while denying me with their actions. Sound familiar? How many scandals have rocked religious institutions? How many megachurch pastors live in mansions while their congregations struggle? How many claim to speak for God while demonstrating the opposite of love, humility, and service? But Jesus didn't stop at warnings. He also provided a solution, a way to recognize true spiritual leadership. Judge them not by their words or their buildings or the size of their following. Judge them by one thing only: do they serve or do they take? Do they empower or do they control? Do they point toward light or do they cast shadows? The Ethiopian texts emphasize that true holiness is quiet. It serves without seeking recognition. It gives without expecting return. It empowers others rather than demanding submission. The message that never died. Here's something the AI analysis made crystal clear. According to Ethiopian Christianity, the Spirit of Jesus never stopped speaking. While Western Christianity taught that Jesus ascended to heaven and his direct communication ended, the Ethiopian texts describe something very different. They say his spirit, his consciousness, his essence remained active in the world, guiding seekers, appearing to the humble, whispering to those with ears to hear. But not in the places you'd expect. Jesus said his return wouldn't be in temples or palaces or centers of power. It would be in deserts and mountains, in the hearts of the forgotten, in the prayers of the oppressed. His voice would come through the humble, through those who suffer, through people the world overlooks. "I will return," these texts record him saying, "not as the world expects, not in glory and trumpets and armies in the sky. I will return as I came the first time, quietly, humbly, among the lowly. And those who look for me in high places will miss me entirely." This is revolutionary. It suggests that the second coming isn't a future event, but an ongoing reality. That Christ consciousness keeps emerging through people who embody his actual teachings: love, service, humility, truth. Think about the people who've changed the world through compassion. Are they the ones with the loudest voices, the biggest followings, the most political power? Or are they the quiet servants, the humble activists, the people who work in obscurity because they care more about impact than recognition? The inner temple, one of the most powerful revelations in the Ethiopian texts, is Jesus' teaching about the true temple of God. "You build monuments of stone, he told his followers, seeking to honor God with your architecture. But God does not dwell in buildings made by hands. The only temple that matters is the one you carry within your chest, your soul, your consciousness, your heart. The AI analysis shows this theme recurring throughout the hidden books, that external religion means nothing if the inner temple is neglected. You can attend services every week, memorize every verse, perform every ritual perfectly, but if your heart remains hard, your consciousness remains asleep, your soul remains disconnected from divine love, you've missed the entire point. Jesus taught that prayer isn't about the words you speak, but the state of consciousness you enter. Fasting isn't about denying the body, but about clearing away distractions. Worship isn't about music and ceremony, but about aligning your whole being, body, mind, and spirit with divine truth. The kingdom of heaven, these texts emphasize again and again, is not somewhere else. It is not after death. It is not in the future. It is within you right now, waiting to be discovered. This teaching is radical because it places spiritual authority directly in your hands. You don't need permission to connect with God. You don't need institutional approval to access divine wisdom. You don't need a mediator between you and the sacred. The inner temple is always open. The question is, have you entered it? The Ethiopian difference. Why did these teachings survive in Ethiopia when they disappeared everywhere else? The answer lies in Ethiopia's unique history. Unlike almost every other region that adopted Christianity, Ethiopia was never colonized by European powers. It never fell under Roman control. It developed its Christian tradition independently, in isolation, free from the political pressures that shaped Western Christianity. When Rome held the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD and decided which books would be official, Ethiopia wasn't there. When the Catholic Church established its canon and declared certain texts heretical, Ethiopia continued reading them anyway. When Protestant reformers created their own version of the Bible, Ethiopia kept its ancient collection intact. Ethiopia became a living time capsule, preserving the earliest forms of Christian thought, the most complete biblical texts, and teachings that might otherwise have been lost forever. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church traces its roots to the 4th century, making it one of the oldest Christian denominations on earth. But its spiritual lineage goes back even further, to the Queen of Sheba, to King Solomon, to the ancient Israelites themselves. This deep connection to biblical history gave Ethiopian Christianity a sense of authority that didn't depend on Rome's approval. They knew their faith was ancient, authentic, rooted in the very land where monotheism began. So when Rome said, "Remove those books," Ethiopia said, "No." And because of that refusal, because of that stubborn dedication to preservation, we now have access to teachings that would otherwise be completely lost. The AI revelation. Now let's talk about the technology that made this discovery possible. For centuries, these Ethiopian texts were locked away, written in Ge'ez, an ancient language that few people today can read fluently. The manuscripts were fragile, some literally crumbling from age. Accessing them meant traveling to remote monasteries in the Ethiopian highlands, gaining the trust of monks who'd protected these secrets for generations, and spending years painstakingly translating by hand. But artificial intelligence changed everything. Modern AI systems can analyze ancient languages faster than any human scholar. They can compare thousands of manuscripts simultaneously, identifying patterns and connections that would take centuries of human work. They can reconstruct damaged texts by analyzing writing patterns and predicting missing words. They can translate ancient ge'ez into modern languages while preserving nuance and meaning. When researchers finally gained permission to scan the Ethiopian biblical manuscripts and feed them into advanced AI systems, the technology revealed something shocking. These weren't just variations of stories already known. They contained completely unique material, teachings, prophecies, and accounts found nowhere else in Christian literature. The AI identified over 2,000 verses that don't appear in any Western Bible. It reconstructed passages that had been deliberately deleted or obscured. It revealed patterns in Jesus' teaching that only became visible when all the Ethiopian texts were analyzed together. And what emerged was a portrait of Jesus that's both familiar and radically different. A teacher focused not on sin and punishment, but on awakening and transformation. A messenger emphasizing inner development rather than external obedience. A guide pointing toward direct spiritual experience rather than institutional religion. The warning about our time. Here's where it gets personal and perhaps uncomfortable. The Ethiopian texts contain specific prophecies about the end times. But unlike the apocalyptic visions you might know from Revelation, these prophecies aren't about beasts and trumpets and lakes of fire. They're about something more subtle and, in many ways, more terrifying: spiritual blindness. Jesus warned about a time when humanity would become completely disconnected from the sacred, when people would worship technology instead of truth, when they'd confuse information with wisdom, when they'd have access to everything but understand nothing. In those days, the texts record, people will speak to the whole world but have nothing to say. They will see everything but perceive nothing. They will be connected to everyone but know no one. Their lamps will burn bright, but their souls will be dark. Is he describing social media? The internet age? Our current moment where we're drowning in content but starving for meaning? The prophecy continues. Love will grow cold. Not that people will become hateful, but that they will become indifferent. They will care more about distant strangers' opinions than their own neighbors' needs. They will perform righteousness for approval rather than from genuine compassion. They will mistake busyness for purpose and anxiety for awareness. Look around. How many people are perpetually distracted, constantly scrolling, forever consuming content, but never truly present? How many relationships exist only through screens? How many perform their lives for an audience rather than actually living? But the prophecy doesn't end in despair. Jesus promised that in this darkest time, a remnant would remain, martyrs who maintain their connection to the sacred, who live with love and truth regardless of the chaos around them. And here's the crucial part. These people wouldn't necessarily be found in churches. They might not even call themselves Christians. They'd simply be living his actual teachings: loving kindness, genuine service, humble presence, regardless of religious label. The cosmic context. The Ethiopian texts go deeper than most modern Christians are comfortable exploring. They describe reality in cosmic terms, a universe of multiple dimensions, hierarchies of spiritual beings, ongoing warfare between light and darkness. According to these manuscripts, Jesus taught about the structure of creation itself. He spoke of the true God, the source of all light, dwelling in a realm beyond human comprehension. But he also warned about a false creator, a prideful being who fashioned the material world as a prison, a trap designed to keep souls ignorant of their divine origin. This shadow creator, Jesus explained, rules through deception. He makes the material world seem like the only reality, makes physical pleasures and pains seem like the ultimate concerns, makes people forget they are spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. You are not your body, Jesus taught according to these texts. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. These are tools, temporary vehicles, but they are not your true self. Your true self is eternal light, a spark of the divine fire that existed before stars were born and will exist after the universe ends. The purpose of Jesus' coming, in this understanding, wasn't just to die for sins. It was to wake people up, to remind them of their true nature, to show them how to escape the prison of materialism and remember their divine identity. This teaching explains why Jesus emphasized inner transformation over external behavior. You can't legislate enlightenment. You can't force awakening. Each person must remember their true nature for themselves through direct spiritual experience. Practical teachings for daily life. But the Ethiopian texts aren't all cosmic theology and mystical visions. They also contain intensely practical guidance for daily living. Jesus taught specific practices for spiritual development. Fasting, not as punishment, but as a way to clear mental fog and heighten spiritual sensitivity. Prayer, not as begging, but as conscious alignment with divine will. Meditation, as a method for silencing the constant mental chatter that obscures truth. He spoke about diet, recommending simple foods and warning against excess. He taught about breathing techniques that calm the nervous system and open spiritual perception. He gave instructions for dream work, helping his followers understand the symbolic language of the subconscious. The Didascalia, preserved in Ethiopia, contains detailed ethical instructions: how to treat employees fairly, how to conduct business honestly, how to resolve disputes peacefully, how to raise children with wisdom, how to care for the elderly and vulnerable. These aren't abstract theological principles. They're practical guidelines for creating a just, compassionate society. And they're shockingly relevant today, addressing issues of economic inequality, social justice, and environmental stewardship in ways that feel contemporary, despite being 2,000 years old. Jesus emphasized that spirituality must be embodied. It's not enough to have nice thoughts and good intentions. You must act. You must serve. You must demonstrate your inner transformation through outer behavior. Faith without deeds, the Ethiopian texts emphasize, is like a lamp without oil. It cannot give light, no matter how beautiful the lamp may be. The mystical Christology. Here's where the Ethiopian understanding of Jesus truly diverges from Western Christianity: the nature of Christ himself. In Western theology, there's endless debate about Jesus' divine and human natures, how they coexist, which takes precedence. The Ethiopian texts approach this differently. They describe Jesus as a cosmic Christ, a divine consciousness that entered human form but existed long before Jesus of Nazareth was born and continues to exist after his physical departure. This Christ consciousness, according to these teachings, is the organizing principle of the universe, the Logos, the Word, the divine intelligence that brings order from chaos and light from darkness. It has appeared throughout history in various forms, always pointing humanity toward truth. Jesus of Nazareth was a perfect embodiment of this consciousness, but he wasn't the only expression of divine light in history. Other prophets, sages, and enlightened beings throughout cultures and times have channeled this same consciousness to varying degrees. This understanding makes Christianity more universal and less exclusive. It doesn't diminish Jesus, it actually expands the significance of his teaching by showing it as part of a larger divine plan to awaken all humanity, not just one religious group. The Ethiopian texts quote Jesus saying, "I am not the light. I point toward the light. I am not the truth. I testify to the truth. I am not the way. I show you the way. When you see me, see past me to what I represent. When you hear my words, hear beyond them to the silence from which all words emerge." This is radical humility from someone Christians usually portray as claiming exclusive divinity. It's Jesus saying, "Don't worship me, become what I became. Don't just believe in transformation, transform." The question of the crucifixion. Now we approach the most controversial claim in the Ethiopian texts, and I need you to approach this with an open mind, setting aside what you've been taught to consider what might be true. Some Ethiopian manuscripts suggest that the crucifixion story, as told in Western Christianity, may not be the complete account. These texts don't deny that Jesus faced persecution or that his ministry ended in Jerusalem, but they hint at a different sequence of events, one where Jesus escaped execution and continued teaching in secret. According to these accounts, Jesus left Jerusalem quietly before the final confrontation. The person crucified, if anyone was, may have been a follower willing to die in his place, or the whole event may have been staged to protect Jesus from Roman authorities. He then traveled east, some traditions say to Ethiopia itself, where he continued teaching before ultimately ascending from a mountain in spiritual, not physical, death. Now, I'm not telling you this is definitely what happened. I'm telling you that this is what some ancient Ethiopian texts claim. Texts that predate much of the Western biblical canon. Why would this version exist? Perhaps because the earliest Christians had different accounts of what happened, and different communities preserved different versions. Perhaps because the crucifixion narrative served Rome's purposes better than a story of Jesus escaping and continuing to teach. Rome preferred martyrs to ongoing revolutionaries. Or perhaps both accounts are true in different ways. The crucifixion as spiritual metaphor, showing the death of the ego and resurrection of the true self, while physically, Jesus continued teaching about this very transformation. The Ethiopian Gospel of Peace emphasizes Jesus as a teacher of life, not death, someone focused on healing, harmony with nature, and peaceful resistance to oppression. This Jesus speaks about purifying the body and soul, about living in balance with creation, about finding God in the present moment rather than waiting for a future salvation. Why this matters now? You might be wondering, why does any of this matter? Why should these ancient texts preserved in a distant country concern modern people? Because we're living in the exact time Jesus warned about. We're drowning in religious performance while starving for genuine spiritual connection. We have more churches than ever but less sense of the sacred. We speak Jesus' name constantly but rarely live his actual teachings. We've built empires in his honor while ignoring the people he called us to serve. The Ethiopian texts offer a way back, not to institutional religion, but to direct spiritual experience. not to theology, but to transformation, not to belief, but to awakening. They remind us that Jesus didn't come to start a religion. He came to wake us up. He came to remind us who we really are beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and forgetfulness. He came to show us that the kingdom of heaven isn't somewhere else. It's right here, right now, within us, waiting to be discovered. These teachings are being revealed now through AI and increased scholarly access, precisely because we need them now. We're at a crossroads as a species facing environmental collapse, social fragmentation, spiritual emptiness despite material abundance. The old answers aren't working anymore. The old ways of doing religion aren't connecting with people's actual experience. But these ancient yet newly discovered teachings speak directly to our current crisis. They address the disconnection we feel. They offer practices that create genuine inner change. They provide a framework for understanding reality that integrates material and spiritual, personal and cosmic, ancient wisdom and modern understanding. The path forward. So, what do you do with this information? How do you apply these teachings in your actual life? First, understand that these revelations aren't asking you to abandon your current faith. They're inviting you to deepen it, to move beyond surface-level practice to genuine transformation. If you're Christian, these texts can help you access the mystical core of your tradition. If you're from another tradition or no tradition, they offer universal wisdom about the spiritual path. Second, focus on the practices, not just the concepts. Jesus in these texts is intensely practical. He doesn't just say, "Love one another." He explains how. He gives specific methods for developing compassion, for quieting the ego, for accessing inner wisdom. Try this. Each morning, before checking your phone or starting your daily routine, sit in silence for just 5 minutes, not to think or plan or worry, simply to be present. Notice your breath, feel your body, watch your thoughts arise and pass without getting caught in them. This simple practice, emphasized throughout the Ethiopian texts, begins to create the inner spaciousness where divine presence can be felt. Third, examine your life honestly. Where are you performing rather than being? Where are you going through religious motions without real transformation? Where are you saying, "Lord, Lord," with your mouth, while denying the teachings with your life? Jesus' warnings about false religion aren't just about corrupt leaders. They're about the false religion we each construct, the ego-driven spirituality that seeks validation rather than truth. We're all susceptible to this. The question is whether we're honest enough to recognize it in ourselves. Fourth, prioritize direct experience over beliefs. The Ethiopian texts emphasize that believing the right things matters less than experiencing the divine for yourself. You can have perfect theology and remain spiritually dead. Or you can have confused beliefs, but a direct encounter with sacred presence that transforms everything. Seek that direct experience. Spend time in nature, recognizing it as the alive presence of God. Sit in meditation, learning to distinguish your true self from the constant mental chatter of the ego. Serve others genuinely, discovering that in giving you receive, in losing yourself, you find yourself. The mystery remains. Even with AI analysis and scholarly research, mysteries remain. The Ethiopian texts hint at teachings still kept secret, knowledge shared only orally between certain monks, practices too sacred for writing. Some Ethiopian monasteries still house manuscripts that have never been scanned, never been translated, never been shared with the outside world. What do they contain? What other teachings of Jesus might still be hidden, waiting for the right moment to emerge? And there's the ultimate mystery. What did Jesus actually experience during those 3 days between death and resurrection? The Ethiopian texts hint at a journey through multiple realms, encounters with cosmic powers, a confrontation with the shadow creator of this world. They speak of Jesus descending to the lowest depths of reality to free trapped souls before ascending to the highest heights. But even these texts admit they're describing something beyond human language, beyond conceptual thought. The resurrection, they suggest, wasn't just a physical body coming back to life. It was a demonstration of a reality our normal consciousness can barely comprehend, where death is an illusion, where consciousness continues through all change of form, where the true self is eternal and indestructible. A living tradition. What's remarkable about Ethiopian Christianity is that it's not just ancient texts, it's a living tradition. Monks in Ethiopia still practice the spiritual disciplines these manuscripts describe. They still fast according to ancient patterns, still pray the prayers Jesus taught, still maintain the mystical practices that connect them to divine presence. These aren't museum pieces. They're tools that still work, techniques that still produce results, practices that still transform consciousness. And now, thanks to AI and modern scholarship, these methods are becoming available to seekers worldwide. Imagine if churches everywhere started emphasizing direct spiritual experience over doctrinal correctness. Imagine if Christian education focused on practices that actually change consciousness, rather than just information about what to believe. Imagine if the goal of faith was awakening, not just assent to propositions. This is what the Ethiopian texts invite: a Christianity that's mystical, experiential, transformative, a faith that changes you from the inside out, rather than just giving you new beliefs to hold. The invitation. After 2,000 years, the Ethiopian Bible has revealed its secrets. AI has unlocked words that were sealed, teachings that were hidden, warnings and promises that were preserved while the rest of Christianity forgot them. What Jesus said after his resurrection wasn't just, "Believe in me and be saved." It was deeper, richer, more challenging than that. He said, "Wake up, remember who you are, transform your consciousness, connect directly with the divine. Don't just worship God, become one with God. In love, become love itself." He warned us that religion would become performance, that faith would become empty ritual, that his name would be used for everything except what he actually taught. And he promised that in the darkest times, his true message would re-emerge, not in the centers of power, but in the quiet hearts of those who seek truth above all else. That emergence is happening now. These texts are available now. The teachings are accessible now. The question is, what will you do with them? Will you dismiss them because they don't fit the narrative you were taught? Will you defend the familiar even if it's incomplete? Will you choose comfortable beliefs over challenging truth? Or will you do what Jesus actually asked? Seek, knock, ask. Question everything. Trust your own direct experience. Let go of what you thought you knew and open to what might be true. The Ethiopian Bible doesn't just contain what Jesus said after his resurrection. It contains what he's still saying. through these newly revealed texts, through the whisper of your own heart, through every moment of genuine spiritual awakening. The real question isn't what Jesus said 2,000 years ago. The real question is, are you listening now?